Gorilla grabs a tourist in South Africa jungle. What the animal did to her surprised the natives. The people who have the healthiest relationships do have arguments and disagreements, but they know the right way to fight and understand that communication is necessary. They respect each other, even when they're mad at each other. They stay on topic and do not digress to bring up past issues, especially if they've already dealt with them. They don't resort to personal attacks, and they know that once you have said something, you cannot take it back. Mostly, they forgive. Note that this applies to healthy relationships only. If a relationship is unhealthy or abusive, then these points should be moot, and the abuser should deal with their issues. It certainly is, each partner is different, but tries to steer the relationship as they would wish. Opportunities arise, and sometimes travel to a new area is required. The world is a big place. Happy relationships still have ups and downs. Take it from me, the couple who solve the downs together are the strongest bonds. Tourists should take only pictures and leave only footprints, they say. For the mountain gorilla, however, something else is being left behind: deadly diseases. Eco-tourists are ignoring the rules and straying too close to the endangered primates, transmitting human infections, a study of trip photos on Instagram reveals. Sandra had been in a relationship with Liam for over 2 years. Now they met at work, and it was an office romance. Sandra could not understand where their feelings came from and attributed them mostly to boredom that she'd been experiencing for the past couple of years. Somehow, Liam managed to dispel it. He was well-read, respectful, had a great sense of humor, and made beautiful gifts over time. The once passionate relationship dulled down, fading away under the pressure of everyday routine. Thus, a vacation for just the two of them seemed like the best idea to rekindle their feelings for each other. Sandra was cheerfully packing up backpacks and suitcases, stuffing them with all sorts of swimming suits, shorts, and hats. Almost every night, the woman dreamed of green jungles full of wild monkeys and colorful birds, yellow sands of the desert scorched by the sun, and the savanna overgrown with gray grass and full of lions and giraffes roaming around. It was their craving for adventure that pushed the young couple to buy tickets to Africa. A few weeks later, all the arrangements were made, and Sandra couldn't wait for their plane to land on another continent. Seeing how the woman was trying to close over the packed suitcase, Liam snorted, "Are you going on vacation or moving?" "Well, I need it all," Sandra answered with a smile. "It's so nice to have a lot of options. I could put on something new every day and always look great." Liam snorted again, then shrugged and walked out of the room. The woman looked after him sadly inside. I hope this vacation helps. After several transfers in different cities and countries, the young people reached the capital of the Congo, where a bus picked them up along with other tourists and took them to a small village, where the camp was located all the way to the camp. Sandra stared out the window. She was fascinated by the savanna that stretched out for many miles around. Unfortunately, Liam didn't share his girlfriend's delight and sat silently, making it obvious that he was unhappy. He didn't like the rest of the passengers. There were 2 young men who were constantly laughing, an elderly French couple, and their guide, a young and pretty black woman. "Why are you pouting? What don't you like?" Sandra whispered, glancing first at Liam, then at the landscapes flickering outside the window. "Look, it's all so beautiful." Liam ignored his girlfriend and stared pointedly at his phone. There was something wrong with him. Something broke inside him, but Sandra couldn't figure out what it was. The only thing she knew for sure was that the trip wouldn't help their relationship. It was foolish to hope. Otherwise, the first night under the African sky was eerie for Sandra. There were too many sounds, the noisy birds and some incomprehensible rustling. The very next morning, all the tourists went to see the incredible, beautiful waterfall, a local attraction that was hidden deep in the jungle. The bus couldn't take them there, so they had to walk most of the way down a narrow path through the jungle. Liam and Sandra also had to take that route, thus having packed up their backpacks. They were the first ones to jump off the bus. The couple wandered into the unfamiliar place on their own, ignoring the instructions of their guide. The majestic view of the waterfall captivated the woman. She stood there for a long time, admiring the incredible view that unfolded on the very cliff in front of her. Taking advantage of Sandra's pause, Liam picked up a large stone and dropped his backpack on the ground. I have to tell you something. There is another woman, the man muttered in a low voice. Her name is Marissa, and you know her. She's 8 weeks pregnant, and the baby is mine. Unwilling to believe her ears, Sandra slowly turned to face her boyfriend and couldn't utter a single word for a long time. Marissa, she finally breathed out, that the woman from the marketing department, are you having an affair with her? Is that what you've been behaving like this here? I'm arranging this whole trip trying to save our relationship. I love her and I don't love you. Liam nodded his head. I only started dating you because you're my boss. I thought you'd give me a promotion and a raise, but you're a pretty woman and a mean one too. I have long waited to get rid of you and become the head of the firm. Sandra staggered and almost fell. Liam's words hit her like a blast wave. Don't do this, Liam, the woman whispered, having guessed her boyfriend's intentions. Don't kill me. Let's go back, and I'll give you whatever you want. Let's just forget about everything that happened. Here, just don't do it. But Liam continued to walk toward his frightened girlfriend, waving the stone in his hand, and no amount of persuasion could change his mind. Sandra got hit on the head and fell off the cliff. She quickly fell down into the green expanse of the lake. In just a moment, the woman found herself in the water. Having nearly choked, she emerged from the cold depths of the surface and looked up, but Liam was no longer there. Sandra screamed, feeling blood gushing from the wound on her head and getting into her eyes. Her screams got lost in the noise of the waterfall, and no one heard her, feeling that she might fail faint. Sandra rushing forward, swimming towards the shore as fast as she could. Having gotten out of the water, she crawled into a small cave behind a tree, and having collapsed on its damp floor. She did faint. In the meantime, Liam put on a whole show for the group. He ran up to the guide and told her that a terrible thing had happened. His beloved girlfriend went too close to the cliff and she fell into the waterfall. The police quickly arrived at the scene, but Liam was already gone by that time, at about the time Sandra woke up, because someone was dragging her deep into the cave. Having opened her eyes, she tried to see who it was, but it was pitch black, so she couldn't make out anything. The outlines of the unfamiliar creature looked huge and terrified the young woman. The animal didn't stop until it finally dragged Sandra out of the cave and into the light. Seeing who was holding her, Sandra squealed and covered her face with her hands. There was a huge gorilla standing in front of her. Every now and then the animal ran up to Sandra and sniffed her, and then laid down next to her and began to scratch her belly. The woman realized that she wasn't in any immediate danger, and put her hand to the thick fur of the gorilla and gently scratched behind her ear. I want to go home. Do you understand me? Sandra cried, addressing the silent animal. First, my boyfriend wanted to kill me, and now you're scaring me. Looking at the woman, the gorilla smiled and smacked her black lips. Suddenly, it jumped to its feet, which nearly scared Sandra to death, and then it started beating its chest with its fists, having rushed off somewhere. After this performance, the gorilla returned holding several branches with mangoes in its hands. Having put its gifts in front of the woman, the animal went back into the cave, and soon Sandra heard it snoring loudly. Sandra had dinner and joined her savior. She lay down next to the gorilla on the cold floor of the cave, clinging to the gorilla with her whole body. The woman quickly warmed up and fell asleep. A few hours later, the gorilla woke Sandra up with a push and led her through the labyrinth of the cave. Sandra obediently followed her silent guide. No longer afraid of anything, in her heart, the woman felt that the gorilla wouldn't harm her and was even trying to help. Suddenly, a bright light hit Sandra's eyes. After yet another turn, she stumbled upon some strange men. They were her rescuers, seeing the wounded woman and the gorilla walking beside her. The men drew their weapons and took aim. Sandra raised her hands up and rushed forward, covering the animal with her body. "Don't shoot," the woman exclaimed. "This gorilla saved my life." But the rescuers didn't understand English well and didn't immediately understand what was happening. One of the men thought the gorilla had attacked the woman. So he fired the shot. The bullet hit the animal in the shoulder, and it started running, roaring loudly. "Why did you hurt the gorilla?" Sandra kept repeating, wiping tears off her face. "The animal didn't do anything wrong." On the way to the lake, Sandra saw the guide surrounded by several policemen. They were discussing something quietly and making notes in their notebook. Having noticed Sandra, They immediately fell silent and rushed towards her. "Thank God you're alive," the guide smiled and hugged Sandra. "The divers had been searching for you in the lake all night long, but then they decided to check the caves. How did you end up there?" The woman briefly told her rescue story and then learned from the police that Liam's body was found lifeless. The investigation was still establishing what happened to the man, but he probably died from a strong blow to the head. "That is horrible," Sandra said, and asked the guide for some water and closed her eyes. The events of the last hour swarmed in her head. Liam's attack and his death, the gorilla, the dark caves, it all felt unreal, like she was stuck in some kind of an old movie. The only evidence of the incident were the abrasions on the woman's body and the pain she was feeling. Sandra will remember this vacation for the rest of her life, but it won't only be the disappointment and betrayal that she'll remember, but also how kind and helpful even the most formidable animals can be. The relationship feels sturdy rather than an emotional roller coaster filled with drama, turmoil, chaos, and disquiet. You assume the best of each other. You are a team. You support and encourage each other. There's no criticism, no fixing, no belittling, no using things to say against you. Your relationship has withstood disagreement. Actually, how you disagree tells you a lot. During disagreements, you seek growth and understanding rather than mutual destruction. When you fight, you take responsibility rather than resorting to blame, accusations, and using words like never and always. You feel like a whole person rather than like a half a couple. You have interests, friends, activities that don't involve your significant other, and he does too. This makes both of you happy, rather than worried, uncomfortable, suspicious, possessive. You carve out time alone. The relationship leaves room for evolution. You've changed is a good thing. You set boundaries that are respected without friction and are respectful of the boundaries of each other. You are responsible for how you feel, and he is responsible for how he feels. The other is your partner, your accomplice, not your flotation device. You are, in fact, an excellent swimmer. When we think of heroes, we tend to think of fictional superheroes in comics or movies or acts of kindness, heroics from strangers or loved ones in real life. From mothers lifting cars off of children, pulling strangers up from train tracks, to anything a police officer, firefighter, or EMT does daily, heroism never fails to warm the heart amidst any disappointment. For example, I did an earlier story about the time a teenager climbed a 120-foot electrical tower to save his autistic younger brother. Also, while such actions never fail to restore our faith in humanity, it adds an extra layer of heartwarming epicness when the real-life hero turns out to not even be a human. Eventually, Levin regained consciousness, and his resulting wailing scared Jambo and the rest of his troop back into a secure portion of their enclosure. With the gorillas secured, a paramedic and 2 zoo staff members jumped down into the enclosure to retrieve Levin. But then a younger male gorilla got loose and started running about at the same time the paramedic tried treating and assessing Levin's injuries on the spot. The zoo staff managed to keep the younger male gorilla at bay long enough for Levin's safe removal from the enclosure. While Levin recovered from his injuries, the astounding home video footage of the incident reached international attention overnight, thus not only becoming a story of a gorilla saving a human child, but one in which public perception of the species as a whole changed forever, and for the better. After recovering, Levin and his family regularly visited the zoo over the years since. Jambo passed away on September 16, 1992, from a spontaneous rupture of a major artery, resulting in a massive hemorrhage in his chest, at 30 years old. Subsequently, a bronze statue of Jambo erected on the zoo grounds as a tribute to the gorilla that helped change public opinion on the species forever, of which Levin was in attendance. Generally, gorillas are very shy and reserved towards people. They will attack only if they are surprised or threatened, or if a person behaves in the wrong way. If the person makes an unexpected movement, the silverback male can react with horrific roaring and bluff charges. This means that he runs straight to the victim with great speed and stops just in front of him, sometimes at a distance of only 1 meter. If the person then behaves submissively by crouching down and looking at the ground, he has nothing to fear. However, if he runs away instead, the excited gorilla is provoked even further. He will follow the fugitive and bite him into the body part he can seize first, most frequently a leg or buttock. The result of such an attack usually is a deep wound. Gorillas are overwhelmingly vegan and spend most of their time eating, which is typical of herbivores. Like most herbivores, they are less aggressive than carnivores and omnivores. The book Gorillas in the Mist shows the scientist Diane Fossey with wild, huge, powerful male gorillas who could have killed her with one smack, but instead are so gentle with her. Going by what I have read, gorillas prefer to simply avoid humans if they can, and merely tolerate humans in the neighborhood if they must, ignoring them so long as they don't approach too closely or create a disturbance. In other words, they're basically peaceful creatures if you don't bother them. But as far as liking humans, there is little to no evidence to that effect. Now, of course, a gorilla in a laboratory situation is naturally going to be lonely because they are social creatures, and such a gorilla might be glad of human company as opposed to being alone. But that does not prove that gorillas as a group or collectively like humans. They will attack only if they are surprised or threatened, or if a person behaves in the wrong way. If the human makes an unexpected movement, the silverback male can react with horrific roaring and bluff charges. Gorillas are social animals and only become aggressive towards humans when they feel threatened. Although there have been close encounters between gorillas and humans over the past decades, very minimal of these incidents have led to death of a human being. Like shy humans, staring directly into the eyes of gorillas make them feel uncomfortable and insecure. When disrupted by your direct eye contact, they can charge aggressively at you to defend themselves. But once you avoid their troop, they'll go away. The whole ferocious gorilla thing is a myth, and typically a ridiculous racist stereotype of those of African descent. Gorillas are not likely to attack a human, and, in fact, there is no evidence to suggest that a gorilla has ever attacked a human unless their babies are under the threat from poachers. Even then, the intent is to keep the infant safe, not to maul a human. If you ever charged by a gorilla, stand still, as hard as it can be, and do not look the gorilla in the eyes or smile.